Ladies and gentlemen, today is June 12th, 2019, and this is the King Kale Show, where we learn to be better artists. My name is Kienan Lafferty. You'll notice I'm using my other hand other than pointing to the sky with this one because I don't want to hit the new microphone setup. But yes, we got a new upgrade, and I'll be trying not to peak. Normally I have to speak really loudly because the thing is on the desk, like way over there. But yeah, we got upgrades. We are finally catching up to a professional setup, and I'm very happy because today we're going to be jumping into the lovely Mika piece. Going to be talking through the process, of course, and I learned, well, actually my coworker blessed me with the knowledge of layer comps so we can easily jump through all of these different process points in the piece. And by the way, you can download this PSD and go to these layer comps yourself. Just open up Window and go to layer comps, and you'll be blessed by this amazing thing. I think the layer comps carry over in the PSD. But you can jump through these different kind of layer comps to kind of see different points of the piece. But the most important thing that we're doing today is we're going to be talking about how this all began. So let's go ahead and take it back to the sketch. Let's take it back to the sketch and let's go ahead and get started. And actually, let me make sure that we have the Instagram ready to go for the end. All right, there we go. So let's go ahead and jump into the beginning. So the point of this piece was that I really wanted to draw Mika in a new style with new clothes, but most importantly, I wanted to get the little cat creature in here. For those of you who have been following the Made of Metal for a while now, you'll know that there are these creatures that can basically bend time and could be the reason why Mika is even transported to the medieval Irish or the medieval Celtic period that she finds Mocha in, okay? So what I wanted to do is I wanted to draw the cat. And actually, this was the very first time that I drew the cat. This was the very, very first time that I drew, well, actually, no, maybe not the first time. But it was the second time that I drew it in actual detail. So I was figuring a lot of stuff out on the fly. And I'm sure that many of you will know that doing concept work, you'll want to draw tons of tiny little sketches and then, go through like 10 to 20 different variations before you finally find the one that you love, of course, and it's this one, right? But the point is that sometimes I really like to just jump into things, especially when it's my own personal work. I like to just make things up on the fly and see what happens. And that's exactly what the case was here. So I want to urge you guys that sometimes it's good to just kind of roll with the punches. Sometimes it's good to just go with what you feel inside and just try something and don't worry about if it is going to work out perfectly or not, okay? So you can see here, this was the general sketch. This was the beginning. I like to always be thinking about curvatures and like gestures in my drawing. So you'll notice that Mika has this very subtle S curve that's going through. See how her head is over here, right? But then her hip kind of sticks out and her leg goes this way. So there's a natural curve that's going through the body. This allows your characters to feel like they have weight. It allows them to feel like they are alive, and it makes them look awesome. So you should always be thinking about lines of action that are going to be moving through your drawing, okay? So let's go ahead. I think that was about all that I wanted to talk about on this. By the way, with the introduction of layer comps, this may speed up the process of the videos quite a bit, because before I'd be fiddling around with all the layers down here trying to get to the right point, but now it's just one button click away, and it almost feels like cheating. It's not right. It was not meant to go at this speed, but regardless, we are going to take advantage of it. And now we're going to start moving into color, okay? Actually, let's go ahead and deconstruct a little bit of the color. So the colors, as you know, you can see that there's a little bit of the color in the lines still. And the reason for that is line coloring. Now, there's two ways that I like to do this. One is by clicking this little checkerboard on your line layer. You can see here's our lines, and making sure that, of course, the lines are see-through, right? So if you get rid of the background, you'll see that you got that nice little checkerboard, meaning it is translucent. And then what you can do is you have successfully locked the line. See how there's a little lock that appears right there? And now you can begin coloring the lines. Now what this comes in handy for is for softening. It's good for softening lines, particularly in areas of bright color. Hence the hair. You can see the pink hair. Let me go ahead and just show you what this can do. Let's go ahead and put the skin in there. So yeah, each of these is on its own layer. And I like to think about lighting my characters. I like to start dark with a lot of my colors. You'll notice that a lot of the skin, it's not like straight like white peach. You can see I added in a little bit of that later. but I tend to start with darker colors and then add light on top of it. Just makes things look a little bit more natural. But going back to line coloring, let me go ahead and show you what happens when you finish your line art and it's all black and white. See how it's much more harsh and it feels like a comic book? Especially with my line art that is very chicken scratchy and kind of messy. So what coloring the lines does is it helps to soften things and it begins blending things to look more, I don't know what you would call it, it just looks more pleasing to the eye. Looks a lot more pleasing to the eye, particularly for things in the background. And especially on skin. I found that skin is a really good place to do this. So adding reds into the skin automatically makes it look like it is livening it up. It is now a living thing versus a black and white, or like just a harsh black line comic book. So give that a shot for yourself. You can go ahead and, of course, take a look at the colors that I used here. But then once I get my drawing to a happy point where I'm pretty satisfied with the colors, I start moving into overpaints. Especially in cases like this, where I'm just kind of throwing paint at the canvas, I'm throwing characters at the canvas and just seeing what happens. I love this point where this is basically the opposite of my professional life, because in my professional life, everything has to be so organized and just ready to make changes. And for good reason, right? I'm trying to work with my client, and it's more about what my client wants versus what I want. So, of course, I'm trying to get into my client's head and give them the character that they're seeing, right? And to do that, you need to have a lot of choices. You need to be able to make a lot of changes. So, hence, things need to be very organized. But here, we can just go ahead and just start throwing in color, throwing on overpaints, right? There's overpaints here, overpaints here. In fact, let's go ahead and just get into those overpaints. Let me show you what's happening with those. So let's see. That is going to be... Oh, whoops. That was way too far. Layer comps, come back to me. There we go. OP. OP layers. Or was it just color? It's just color. Okay. So one overpaint is right there. That's the face. A good thing to do is just click on these layers here. Again, sorry that they're not exactly labeled. That's another point I was trying to make with my personal work, is that I like it to be messy. I like to just throw things at the canvas, and I like to see what happens, okay? But you can see there's the overpaints right there. That's helping to refine Mika's face a little bit. You can see there, and then a little bit more overpaints, refining further. Adding light onto the sweater. You can see there. And look, I actually just took the overpaint layer and I just added lines. I added the lines for the cat creature onto the overpaint. That is how absolutely disorganized this entire PSD is. But I wanted to show you guys that because, you know, don't worry so much if it's your own personal work. That's your chance to basically open the toy box of whatever you want to throw at the canvas, and don't worry about everything needing to be perfect. Don't worry about everything needing to be organized, because I've found that, at least for me, when I'm not focusing so much on being organized, I find that I'm more creative. I find that I'm able to have more happy accidents, even though I've hated that term for the longest time now, but I'm starting to come around to it, because I truly think that it is true. It is true that a lot of great good accidents can come from when you are relaxed, when you are focusing on your creativity and just allowing things to come out naturally. Okay, let's talk about this cat creature. Okay, so for the cat, I knew that I wanted to have basically like an animal-looking creature, right, with some obviously exaggerated proportions, like the giant ears and this funny kind of shape for the head. And really what this comes down to is I had done some earlier sketches of a character that just kind of had this shape of a head, right? And it just kind of looked like this, and then it had like some ears. I was like, I really like that. I like the simplicity of this. And simplicity is something that I really enjoy when creating characters, creating original characters, especially if there's any chance that it is going to be animated or put into a comic, because having simpler characters really comes in handy when you need to start drawing them hundreds and hundreds of times. So I'm trying to like walk this line between what is painterly and what is something that could translate into a cartoon fairly easily. Okay, so we've got basically this shape which creates our cat. Okay, let's go ahead and delete that. And I wonder if I should keep my sketches for you guys. I wonder if I should keep the sketches. I'll keep the sketch in there for you guys. I'll just create another. I'll create another layer for the people that download this later. You guys get some bonus sketches. All right, so I was really thinking that I wanted it to have this ethereal kind of starry glow inside of it, and then this jewelry, this golden jewelry that just made it look like it was like ancient, or like something that it had adorned itself with like this beautiful jewelry. Okay, and it has this glowing yellow eyes, again, just to kind of pop out from the purples and blues. Speaking of purples and blues, let's go ahead and get in here and let's talk about some of the color choices, because interesting color choices have to do with something called the color boomerang. And I've gone into this before. You guys can go check out an older episode on this. However, I feel like I demonstrated it really well here. So let's go ahead and get into that. The color boomerang has to do with this. It has to do with a color that is on the top, basically, or basically one color. This would be our desaturated color. Let's just call this DS. DS, okay, desaturated, okay, and then notice there's this little point in between where there's like this blue. It's a saturated, right? But then we go back into this area, which is again desaturated again. And what this does is it creates interesting, and let me go ahead and prove this to you. So we have desaturated. See how down and to the left we are? Desaturation means you're moving to the left on a piece. Saturated, of course, means you're moving to the right. See how saturated and bright this gets? So we're starting with this desaturated color. Then as we go to the center, whoa, look at that. We jumped all the way over to the right. We went through this wormhole and came out on the other side. Okay, so we're going right here to right here. And then, look at this. We go up and to the left very slightly, very slightly. So what's going to happen is you're going to have this boomeranging effect, or parabola, more likely, because boomerang, of course, returns to you. This is not returning to the point of origin. This is just more parabola-ing. So we go whoop like that, and that creates interesting color. Okay, let's go ahead and show it again down here. We're going left to the right, and we're also hue shifting. See how we're hue shifting around here? Pay attention to this Richter scale. We're hue shifting up to purple, then we're going back to blue. There's our parabola. Interesting, huh? Interesting, no? I love that stuff. So there's a mixture of color parabola, color boomerang. I just feel like it's easier to say. Color boomerang is easier to say. And then we also have a bit of hue shifting between purples and blues. And when you do stuff like that, it is automatically going to begin creating interesting color variations. And all I'm doing, like I said, is I'm taking this knowledge and I'm just kind of throwing it at the canvas and saying, okay, you might be asking, well, how did I know to put the desaturation on the top of the head? And the answer is it doesn't really necessarily need to be that way. If anything, the reason why the desaturation is on the top of the head is because I wanted to create this magical feeling to the creature. So I wanted the light, basically the way the character was lit, to defy the expectation of the rest of the piece. And what is the rest of the piece? We have this top lighting, right? Top light is coming from the top, and of course, lighting Mika's face. It's lighting her sweater right here. And all this light is coming from the top, okay? So we have brightness at the top. Whereas with the cat, we have dark values at the top. It's reversed. It's almost like now there's a flashlight underneath the character, lighting it from below. And what this causes your mind to do is to say, this character is not obeying the laws of physics. This is not obeying the laws of light. It must be a magical creature, right? However, the gold on it, again, we're reinforcing this with the gold. The golds here are actually being lit in a moderately normal way. So the gold feels physical, whereas the cat's body feels ethereal, it feels magical. And that is the subtle reason why it is being lit from the bottom. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue. Let's go into refinement, okay? So this is perfect. This is going to, again, refresh everything that I just talked about. That is, of course, color boomeranging and hue shifting. So let's go ahead and get into this. So you can see here, we've got a little bit more refinement happening. But then we also added in another area. We added in some more purples. So we're going from this desaturated blue, but then look at what we did on the edge. We went way up into these purples up here, right? And then we also kind of desaturated it. And the way that I picked this color was, I just tried it. I just picked a color and threw it into the gray. And here's the coolest thing, is that I find when you're working with color boomerang, or just working with desaturated colors like this. So let's say that we wanted to add in a little bit of green. I find that when you are working with controlled colors, you're not trying to move all the way up and to the right, control your colors. And I find that when you throw it in, let's say with like a chalk brush, I'm just gonna kind of throw this on there. I've noticed that it just tends to look very pleasing. It looks pleasing because the colors are already kind of close to one another. So you can get away with all kinds of weird color transitions when things are desaturated. See how we can just add that green in and it still feels like it kind of belongs there. And let's take a look at what color we actually use. See, again, very, very controlled. So if you wanted to start adding more color to your pieces, if you wanted to start getting a little bit adventurous with your pieces, pay close attention to your areas of gray and places where you could use controlled colors, right? Because as soon as we start adding in this, see, it looks out of place. But all we did was we took the color that we had and brightened it and moved it all the way to the right. Looks out of place. Don't do that. Don't do that. Control your colors. Make yourself happy, okay? Make yourself happy. Get some cool color palettes. And so that's what I did. I just chose a very controlled purple, and I added it in to the edges, and it created a really awesome effect. And speaking of awesome effects, the next thing that I wanted to kind of highlight the magicalness of this creature was I wanted to have like a starry field inside of it, or just kind of like these weird portals, these strange torus shapes that were happening within its tail, and these cool lights. And basically all I did was I just drew in those stars, and I used a brush of mine. I'm getting more into these custom brushes. By the way, if those of you who have not downloaded my brushes, if you would like to try them, they are available in the description. Let's go ahead and go to the one that I used. I think I used Freckles. Yeah, I used Freckles. And see, it's just a very easy way to throw in stars. So I'll throw in stars like this, and then I'll go to like the chalk brush. And then I'll start basically like crossing some of these stars like this. Like that. See? Now automatically adds a bit of interest to the stars. And there you have your very own galaxy. You are creating galaxies. You are a god of the cat people. And you alone have the power to add the stars in. In fact, we'll just leave those stars there. Why not? We'll just leave them there. This is for you guys to download, so you guys can have some fun with that. Moving on. We're going to start going back to Mika. We've been spending a little bit of time, quite a bit of time with the Guardian. Let's get back to Mika. Let's talk about this layer. Okay, so this layer is something that I have personally happened upon. I'm sure everybody else does these types of things, but I just discovered it, so I feel very special, and I want to show you guys what is actually happening here. So you can see, take a look down here at the layer property hard light. Why would we ever choose that? Well, let's go ahead and set it to normal and see what we're actually working with. Set it to normal and set the opacity to 100. Do you see what we've done here? We've basically stamped the entire layer, which you can do by hitting Shift Control Alt E, right? So let's say you create a new layer right here. Shift Control Alt E. See how layer 57 is now a stamped version of this. It's a stamped version. And then what I've done is I've gone into Filter, Blur, and then Gaussian Blur. And now we can set ourselves up to create. What we're doing is we're adding a post-processing effect to it. And what this is going to do is it's going to heighten colors. It is going to make colors begin kind of mixing in a cool way, a kind of a bloomy effect. And it's going to be very, very subtle. Okay, so we're going to set this to hard light and see how this is like way, way too intense. We want to set that down to like maybe about 20, like 30% around there. And another thing that I found that helps is increasing the lightness and maybe lowering saturation. Increasing or lowering. Find something that works for you. And then what you want to do is just click it on and off. And you see how it's very, very subtle, but things begin to feel like they're glowing a little bit more. It adds a little bit more life and contrast to your piece. I really, really enjoy doing this. I find the reason why I got into this was because I've been studying a lot of anime and a lot of animation techniques. And I always wanted to know, like, how do they make, you know, these 2D drawings that with flat color look so vibrant and awesome? And I think that they're doing something like this, where they're having, like, they're basically taking the footage, duplicating it on top of itself, and then creating different sorts of bloom effects. And this creates a very cinematic quality. Okay, so that's all we've done here. Basically created this. I actually blurred it a lot more, as you can see. And then we'll set that down to 25, 28. So yeah, you'll want to play around with different variations of Gaussian blur. because too much and it'll give you a different effect than if you do just a little bit, right? So in this case, like I said, your image should look something kind of like that if you want a similar effect, okay? So that is what I like to call the cinematic layer. That's where it takes the colors and it makes everything kind of pop out, makes things just look really, really nice. It ups the contrast, makes things look like they're blooming and kind of mixing into one another. Now let's go ahead, and speaking of bloom and cinematic effects, we're doing another hard light layer because we are blooming little things on the tail. We're blooming that shine on the knife. And we're adding in our signature, right? Because right now I was saying to myself, I feel like this is done. But of course, we all know that take a little bit of time. It's always good to take some time before you publish your piece and ask yourself, is this really ready to go out? And you know what I realized? It was not ready at all, and there was something very important that was missing. Can you guess what it was? Yes, of course, it was the rim light. I can't believe I was about to publish this without putting on the rim light. Okay, and you guys might think I'm over-exaggerating, right? Being over-dramatic, but no. Rim light is so important. It is so important because it allows your character to basically have the other edge of them defined. The edge that is going away from us. It brings out those edges and it creates much more clarity, makes everything look so nice. You should always be having and thinking about rim light in your pieces. Now, some of you may still not be convinced, and let me show you. Let me convince you right now, okay? Because you're looking at rim light. Well, you're looking at a secondary fill light right now. It is on me, okay? We have the primary light coming from the front, the window, but then watch what happens when I turn off this fill light. Do you see how gross and disgusting the footage is? Do you see how just all of the edges of my body, I mean, there's still a little bit of reflected light, but it just feels like it's not really clean and rounded and there's not enough information there. But once I put on the light, see how now the side of my face is lit, there's all of those, and it just has that nice, interesting movement of color. And the same thing is at play here. So you'll want to be thinking about two major light sources. I always like to think about, your main primary light, which is lighting the front of your characters, but then don't forget about rim light. That is going to add so much information to your piece. And in this case, I mean, it's just kind of a general light coming from behind or maybe to the side, but you can see for yourself. It adds a lot of information, looks really nice. So don't underestimate rim light or secondary light, whatever you want to call it. Now let's go ahead and move into the next part here. We're adding in a little bit of detail to the shadows as well as on the pantyhose. Looking nice, looking very nice. And now we're going to be moving into, again, layers that I didn't know were so important until recently. And these are gradient maps. Let's see what we got here. A gradient map that is going from cool to warm. Now let's go ahead and set this up as normal. Let's go ahead and set the opacity to 100. Now this is what I like to call basically unifying your shadows and lights. What this is doing is a gradient map, by the way, those of you who don't know how to make one, all you have to do is simply go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and then go to Gradient Map, okay? And then hit OK. What it's going to do is it's going to create a hideous looking version of your character like this first, but then you want to click this gradient right here. And I like to default just to this one. I'm pretty sure this is on all Photoshops, where it just takes the colors, it takes the darker colors, right, represented by the left part of the gradient, and then the light colors represented by the right side. And it'll basically make your shadows blue and your lights orange. Now, what is the significance of this? The significance is that you can now go through your layer styles and say, I want this to affect my drawing in different ways. I like to personally just use the arrow keys to move through here. Just to see what it's going to do. Hey, that looks kind of cool. Looks kind of Instagram filtery. This is exactly what Instagram filters are doing to your photos and why it looks good. It is unifying your colors. It's unifying your shadows and lights. And that is pleasing to us for whatever reason. So I think I used lighten. I'm pretty sure I used lighten. And then you want to set the opacity, right? Again, similar to Instagram. Now, all of a sudden, you're Instagramming your drawings. And you can set the opacity to whatever basically whatever floats your boat, okay? So let's go ahead and go back to where we were. Whoops. Where were we? There we go. So this was set to lighten, and the opacity was at 36. Next, we're going to move on to curves. Curves is also another very, very subtle thing. You can see it's just adjusting the contrast. Similarly, you can go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and then just choose Curves. Curves is a very interesting thing because you want to learn a little bit about how this works. I just know that if you pull things down, it'll make it darker, right? It'll make the drawing darker. It also increases the saturation of your color, so that could be nice. And then up towards this side, it's going to increase your lights. So if you really exaggerate it, you might get something like this. It may be a cool design. It may inform and inspire you for a new style. I think this looks pretty dang cool on its own, but it is, of course, very, very exaggerated. So let's go ahead and just take it back to where it was. And let's move on to, wait, what is this? Color balance? Yes, color balance. Same thing, layer, adjustment layers, color balance. Now what we've done here is we've chosen the highlights. We pushed them a little bit more towards yellow. Midtones, it looks like a little bit more cyan. And then shadows, we've pushed towards blue. But you can see here, you can, again, mess with these sliders. Again, very similar to Instagram. You're doctoring up your photo, making it look really nice for the final bits. Speaking of final bits, let's go ahead and get into the end of this. Yes, we are finishing up here. So what we're doing now is we are adding very subtle gradients to the background. You can see here I added in that title as well, but then I got rid of it because I wanted a very subtle gradient of gray, light gray at the top to go to darker gray at the bottom. Subtle gradients like this I find add just, again, just that tiny little bit of like a photographic quality or like a cinematic quality. You don't want your background to be just flat. You don't want it to be just a flat color. Sometimes just a little bit of change, a little bit of gradient from top to bottom or vice versa can make things look really nice. So that's exactly what we've done here. You can see a very, very subtle gradient from light gray to dark gray. Added that title back in there. By the way, that reads Meido Abu Metaru. And that was translated by my good friend Jordan. And he's an awesome man, very, very fluent in Japanese, thanks to his 2 years spent there. Very cool, good friend to have. Thank you, Jordan. And then we added in a little bit more of our overpaints. Then we added in again, I think we just flattened this layer. We flattened this layer and again, made this into an overpaint. So again, very disorganized, but it works. So this was me going back in and adding that detail to the shoes. The shoes are so important to just have looking right. I am such a stickler on just a couple things. I'm very, very much a stickler on faces, hands, and feet, okay? Those three things must be looking very good. They have to be looking good, okay? That has to do with the gesture, you know, the cuteness of the face, and the feet have to look like they're actually standing or just in proper perspective. I still find that drawing feet and shoes is a very challenging subject for me, so I'm trying to get better at it. Most of the time because I'm just not drawing the characters from a full body pose like this, so you're oftentimes just not seeing it. You're not seeing the legs. I did make some minor changes to this after I uploaded it to Instagram. Again, taking some time to let your piece simmer before you are ready to finally publish it, I think is a very important thing, just because of a couple changes that you might make. I didn't like how this tail was connecting to like Mika's butt, all right? It was creating a strange silhouette. So I just wanted to break that right there and just have it be a clean read. I think I also, oh yeah, I was looking at the proportions on Mika's face. I didn't like how her eyes were so far apart. They're looking kind of strange. I know anime faces are already defying the laws of what faces should be, but I wanted the eyes to be just a little bit closer together. I also changed up her neck. I feel like the neck was just a little bit too far back. I wanted to add some additional volume there, which was actually just achieved by changing the necklace there. So easy stuff, easy stuff. And then to wrap it all up, I think I looked at her overall proportions and I said, you know what? I feel like her legs are just way super long. I want to actually just bring her crotch down just a little bit to give her a little bit more kind of hip to leg ratio. And again, all of this was done just by going up to filter liquify. Now I know what some of you are saying. Oh my gosh, I would never use the liquify tool. I need to make sure my drawings are perfect from the start. I can't use liquify to like change things. No, actually you should be, because all artists are doing this. All artists are using liquify to change things up, okay? Of course, there's a good way to use it and a bad way to use it. This would be a bad way to use it. But just moving things around a little bit at a time, making final adjustments, there's no problem with that. You're working digital. You must use the computer to your advantage to create the most amazing piece possible that you can do, right? Learn along the way. have yourself a good time. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen. That is how you create a Mika. That is how you create a Guardian of Time. And I hope that you guys got some good value out of this. Hope you guys learned some amazing things. Again, you can download the PSD right up here, as well as all the other PSDs from the past. And I thank you guys so much for supporting the show and so much for, again, tuning in. And yeah, I hope that you guys are learning. And of course, thank you guys so much. Thank you mostly for the amazing work that you have been submitting on the Instagram. Let's go ahead and pull that up. Let me make sure this is all set to go. Oh, we got some special music for the outro too. Let's go ahead and lower that down so it doesn't blow out your ears. And let's go ahead and pull up the Instagram. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, you all take care of yourselves. Thank you so much for the redraw. Actually, this hashtag should be different. This is not K & Kale fan art anymore. This is K & Kale redraw. Redraw. There we go. All right, take us out. Music. Here we go. All right, take care, everyone. See you next time.